briefly before, we're talking about the 4 pillars, and I just want to mention to the audience that I really believe in eat, move, sleep, and structure. And the movement part is so important. Exercise does release positive neurochemicals in the brain, so we know there's a biological basis. I think most people wouldn't doubt that. I see those 4 pillars as like building a house. You need a really strong foundation, and yes, you need walls, you need roofing, but you need the slab and the foundation to be solid first. And movement, exercise is a really important part of that.
Can sport shape our identity and even our mental health? For many of us living with bipolarity, the link between performance, pressure, and mood regulation felt almost too familiar. Welcome to Bipolar Talk, the podcast where we turn our bipolarity into an opportunity. I'm Clément Bessard, the founder of Upstage, and today we dive into sport with a great psychiatrist, Stephen Chau. And we're going to try to learn with him, like, as he's a director, senior consultant, and psychiatrist in Melbourne Mental Health. How can we help ourselves using sport and maybe learn about a lot of other great things? But I'll let you present yourselves.
So thanks for having me on, Clément. It's a pleasure to be on this podcast and really sort of support what you do and what Upstage is about. Yes, I'm Steve. I'm a psychiatrist, been in private practice for, too embarrassed to say, over a decade now. I run Melbourne Mental Health in Hawthorn, where there's a dozen other psychiatrists and psychologists and GPs and social workers. We have a real team here. And I guess we have a multidisciplinary mental health team where we look after people from all walks of life, including bipolar. As you probably might already be aware at the moment, ADHD is very in demand in terms of supporting patients with those needs, but certainly our clinic is not an ADHD clinic per se, it's a mental health clinic first and foremost. We manage perinatal issues, bipolar, OCD, addiction, whole range of things. So that's sort of a bit of my background there.
Yeah, so I want to know a little bit more about, because you're doing a lot of great work, which is like, how do you hire psychiatrists and how do you know? Because I think it's important to understand as patient, because when we go in front of a psychiatrist, we're looking for something. And I'm curious to know what you're looking for.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that because our clinic has grown a lot quicker than I thought it to be. I'm a bit of a control freak and I'm very careful who I bring on board, because if you think about it, all we have as humans is our character. And your reputation is a reflection of your character. And I've worked really hard over years to do things ethically, do things professionally so that the reputation's good and I get GP refers to me. So if I bring a psychiatrist on or a psychologist on and I tell another GP, hey, we've got a new clinician joining, refer your patients to see them, I have to make sure that they have the same quality and standard that I am proud of. Otherwise, the GP will say, hold on, what's going on here? My patient said that they didn't have a good experience. And with mental health, it's such a important area that to me, the relationship we have with the patient is so important, right? That you just can't have people who don't have that empathy and that personality. So we actually recruit based on personality first and foremost. I'm a big believer skills can be taught, and obviously you need to have skills and you need to have knowledge and know your evidence base. But to me, I recruit on people's warmth and friendliness. So whenever I interview any clinician or even the admin team, I'm sitting here thinking, how would I feel if I was a patient in front of this person? And to be perfectly blunt, and I'm very direct and transparent, I wear my heart on my sleeve. There are definitely been psychiatrists I've interviewed before where I'm sitting there thinking, I don't feel any warmth from you. I wouldn't feel comfortable being a patient in front of you. And I wouldn't have them on board. So I'm very selective who I bring on board. It helps when you bring some really good people on board and then word of mouth travels. So then a colleague of theirs that goes, oh, so-and-so works at the clinic, I've heard good things. I'm interested in speaking to you, Steve. And then if the person I'm already working with, I trust and know them well, tell me, oh, this person's, is a good person to bring on board. They'll understand our ethos, what we're about. It makes it a bit easier. So you'll find that a lot of the psychiatrists here sort of know each other a bit from other areas, and it sort of goes from there. That's how I prefer to do it. I prefer to grow, small. We're not one of those, venture capitalists, big empire clinics. We're really about giving really high quality care and working with people I want to work with.
At the end, that's the most important. And as patient, if you're listening, it's the same for you looking for the right psychiatrist. It's like, do you feel the connection with him? And it's what I look at my psychiatrist. I'm like, do I want to trust him? Do I want to tell him everything? And of course, there's skills, but at the end, it's a connection, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's really important because sometimes someone such as myself who's doing private practice for a long time, we lose sight of how important that patient first experience is, because there could be someone who's thought about seeing a psychiatrist for a long time, saved up a lot of money because it's expensive, and then two, it's the first experience. And if you don't recognize that for that person, it's really important, and you just think, oh, it's just a job, I just do this day now, you don't understand how hard it is for that person to sit in front of you, to share a lot of things they share. And I feel it's a real privilege being a psychiatrist. I hear things from patients that they've never told even their soul, not their partners, not their family. And to me, it's a real privilege. So you have to honor that, and you have to really respect that. And so I work really hard to develop a relationship with patients. And I guess the way I do that is, if you look at our website, the reason why the first value we have on our website is sincerity, because I'm a big believer, as long as you're just sincere, that counts a lot. Because I tell my patients, if you trust me enough to call you out on your stuff, hopefully you'll trust me enough when I give you praise. I don't say just to make you feel better. I say because I genuinely believe it. So that connection is really important. And it's evidence-based as well. Come on. So if you look at some research, there are one of the biggest factors of the likelihood of persons recovering well is the rapport they have with the clinician. That's really, really important. And I often tell people, I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room, but I think my sincerity sort of is, I don't know, transparent to patients, to be honest.
Yeah. So I feel it's really important. So I wanted to go a bit deeper on the topic, which is sport. As we talked a little bit before about, for you, the pillar of health. And I think it's really important to explain what you're saying and how sport is one of the most important things for us as patients. To quickly tell you a little bit about my story, if you're listening, when I had my last depression, one of the most important things that I did was to go for a walk every morning at 9 a.m. and talk to a friend. And I feel it was actually the most important thing. Of course, I was happy to have a good psychiatrist, but just going for a walk was like, so
Yeah.
I'm really curious to have your opinion, Stephen.
Yeah, well, I think there's two factors there. There's just this general exercise and the sport itself. And yes, well, briefly before we're talking about the four pillars, and I just want to mention to the audience that I really believe in eat, move, sleep, and structure. And the movement part is so important. I think we all are well versed enough to know that, exercise does release positive neurochemicals in the brain. So we know there's a biological basis. I think most people wouldn't doubt that. I think sometimes what happens is when something's repeated over and over again, it almost feels not important if everyone's talking about it, and people underestimate that, which is why I was saying before that I see those four pillars as like building a house. You need a really strong foundation. And yes, you need walls, you need roofing, but you need the slab and the foundation to be solid first. And movement, exercise is a really important part of that. With sport though, what actually takes that to a next level is community sport. Because if you think what sport is, you're having the movement, the exercise, which is already releasing those biochemicals we spoke about, but that you're having structure. I love how you said you did it at a certain time every day. You're creating a discipline and a structure. With community sport, you're with other people. There's a social aspect to it. You're contributing something bigger than yourself. There's camaraderie. So there's so many elements of actually, whether it's community sport or even elite athletes that I look after, how it's so important because it filters down both structurally in terms of discipline, in terms of social connection, and actually the physiology of actually just moving and doing exercise.
One of the things which is tough for us is like getting the motivation and getting into movement. What do you think can help us getting this first step? Because when I feel most of the time is when I'm helping someone, it, of course, is going to tell me, oh yeah, I love to do, I think walking is good, but they don't do it. And sometimes what I do is I go for a walk with them, actually. Conversation, the peer helping session by walking. And so what is your tips to make your patient actually do it?
Yeah, I think there's a few. First of all, I think you need to let the patient know how important it is in the sense that there's a different way, go for walks versus like I described before, actually sitting the patient down, having a proper conversation, explaining to them why it's important, where it's coming from so they can really appreciate it. And I think that's where sincerity matters because you can just say something offhand, go for walks. I think communicating the actual like physiology to the patient and the importance of it. And then you want to look at a few different tips and tricks. One, I think you already briefly touched on this, where they can buddy up We're more likely to do something when we commit to another person. It's really interesting. For a lot of us, we're the harshest towards ourselves. We're often much kinder to other people. So if we agree with a friend and we'll go for walks together, you're far more likely to do it than if you just did it on your own. So having a buddy, to be accountable to, and vice versa to motivate you. Also, when we talk about exercise, it comes in so many shapes and sizes. I tell people, choose the ones you enjoy. Because I tell patients all the time, I enjoy running, but I hate running on a treadmill. Like the chance of me running on a treadmill is almost close to zero. I like running on the street. So just being mindful that exercise is such a broad term. Let's break it down to what do you actually enjoy doing and choose those exercises as opposed to, oh yeah, these people tell me these exercises are good for me, but I don't like doing them, and you force yourself to do it. You won't sustain an activity you don't enjoy doing. So finding an exercise that you actually enjoy doing. Obviously creating structure, so making a bit of a routine. I'm very visually oriented, so I often tell my patients, if you're visual, let's map out your week and let's look at where we can put in exercise. And I always tell people start low. Sometimes what can happen is that when we feel we start too low, we're almost a bit dismissive of it. We're like, oh, it's too easy. There's no point even, that won't achieve anything. But I tell people, hold on, if we're saying we're struggling to do it regularly, we've got to start somewhere. And I call it an entry point. You want to pick an entry point where you can do it and you build. And I often tell people boredom is actually a really good signal, because boredom means you're doing the thing so easily and regularly now, you're ready for the next stage. So what I find is a bit of a trap people fall into is, I'm so motivated, I want to do this, I'm going to walk 5 times a week. And what happens is they don't do the 5 times a week, so that it becomes an all or nothing proposition where I can't do it 5 times a week, so I might as well do nothing. So I tell people, start low, buddy up, pick an exercise you enjoy doing. And of course, there are more nuanced tips that it depends on the particular person. For example, do they live in a warm climate, a cold climate? There's more individual things like that. But again, having the person understand the importance, creating a routine, having another person keeping them accountable, starting low and then building up on that. They're good tips to begin with, to be honest.
Yeah, I fully agree, because I'm doing almost the same thing. One of the things that I love is the concept of atomic habits, which is like, finding and that's what I try to do with the people that I help is like, okay, what's your goal? What are you going to offer yourself if you achieve this goal? And what is your minimum? And because, as you just say, Stephen, you don't want people to be frustrated if they don't achieve the high goal, that they still be happy, like, okay, I went for 2 walks this week, but it's better than last week. I did 0. And so how do you use those methods?
Yeah, they're part of the tips as well. And also something called habit stacking. Habit stacking is sometimes when someone's trying to introduce a new routine, they can find it hard to stick with. So we try to anchor it to a routine they're already doing. And the other thing is also doing a bit of an assessment or a psychological audit, so to speak, of what the person already is doing. I'll give you a really good example. I had a patient of mine where she was getting really frustrated that she wasn't sticking to her gym goals. She felt like a failure, that real hard punitive sort of self-talk, that real inner critic. And we sat down and we went through, okay, what actually movement and exercise are we doing during the week? Let's see whether we're doing absolute 0 or we're doing more than we're giving ourselves credit for. And she completely discounted the fact that she was walking her dog regularly. Because in her mind, her goal was, I got to the gym, I got to pump weights, got to do this. And because she wasn't doing it, she felt like she wasn't achieving this value that was important of health. But when we walked it through, she was actually walking the dog several times a week. So getting someone to acknowledge that sometimes the things you're already doing are actually working towards a goal can increase their confidence. Oh yeah, I can do some things. Let's add a little bit more. And again, you got to tailor it, review it, evaluate. And I love the idea, where you have a minimum and you have what you aim for. And of course, within all of that is a healthy dose of self-compassion, not being too harsh on ourselves. I always find it's a fine line, though. I often tell patients, I always want to nudge you. I never want to push you, but I always want to nudge you, is how I sort of approach things.
So can you tell us a bit more about habit stacking? Because I feel it's a concept that we all can learn from.
Yeah, look, habit stacking probably is very popular in the ADHD world. Like I said, it's one of my areas of specialties, but certainly can apply to anything else. It's that we forget that all routines are unnatural to begin with. Routines become routines because we do it repeatedly and we get used to it. So it's a way of examining, okay, what are the things I do all the time already? and what's a new thing I want to add to my routine, and can I connect it to something that I'm already doing so it flows a bit more easily. And again, I don't want it to be all about ADHD because at the moment it is all about ADHD. I'll give an example. I have a lot of patients who respond well to medications, but they just forget to take it. And you would think, oh, hold on, if the medication works for you, why don't you just take it, right? They know that. They're not silly. So it's about the fact that it doesn't become part of the routine. So an easier way is maybe you put the medication right next to your toothbrush. Because if you brush your teeth every morning, it's not a big leap to actually just take the medication. It's a slight addition, as opposed to if you want to create a whole new routine and it's really, if it exists in a vacuum, it's very hard to add into someone's lifestyle. So habit stacking is stacking a new habit to a habit you're already doing to make it a bit easier to stick with.
And I'm going to that because I feel it's really important for us. And so if you are listening, what can you do is like, how can you build those habits and what to choose to build on?
Sorry, as in, you mean in terms of where to start, or?
Yeah, it's like, so if you're listening to the podcast, you're a patient, you want to start doing habit stacking. It's like, what would you tell us? How can we start and how can you figure it out?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, again, my techniques don't work for everyone. We all think and learn differently, but I'm very visual. So I would actually get the person to do like a A4 piece of paper, right, Monday to Sunday, and then get them to do what we call a habit audit, where you actually write down what you're already regularly doing. Because sometimes our brain can play tricks. We are so down on ourselves that sometimes we think in black and white, oh, I can't do any habit. I'm not good at adding any routines. When you get the person to sit down and write down what are they regularly doing, they're pleasantly surprised. They actually do a lot of regular things in their lives already. And then you want to ask them, okay, what are the things you want to add to it and achieve? And then try to choose the easier one first. You don't want to start at the hardest. It's like swimming. You don't want to swim the deep end, start in the shallow end, and then figure out, okay, on a practical level, that new habit I want to add, can I add it to what I'm already doing? And if so, let's start adding it slowly, maybe a few times a week, adding a bit more, making it more regular. And that will slowly build that person's confidence. And then they will feel more confident moving towards the more harder habits to add. So I think the crucial thing is actually getting the person to acknowledge and write down what they're already regularly doing. Because most people think they're not regularly doing anything, but a lot of us do regular things.
Yeah, as you say, brushing our teeth. At least most of us do.
Yeah. And in bipolar, as you probably know, like structure, there's something called interpersonal social rhythm therapy. It's the idea if we can have a lot of structure, regular wake times, regular sleep times, regular meals, it really helps bipolarity.
Yeah, it helped me a lot personally, like going to sleep at the same time, waking up at the same time, even in the weekend. I'm not like a monk, so sometimes, but I try my best and it helps a lot. And I feel like, yeah, the pillar of health is like, it's always back to those little things. And how do you make it? So I want to go a little bit back to sport. Can you tell us what are the effects of exercise and sport? What are the difference between those two on our brain? And how does it help us? Quick break. Can you let us a review on Apple Podcasts or the platform of your choice? It really helps us break the stigma around bipolarity. Let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, I think most people know that with exercise and sport, it releases endorphins, which is a pleasure chemical, but it also releases dopamine as well, and a whole bunch of other neurochemicals as well. So the idea is that you're actually allowing your brain and body to feel more positive experiences, which is especially important, I guess, if we're on a sort of bipolar depression phase, because we often feel we can't feel good in any way, and therefore there's no motivation. So the mere fact of actually moving releases more positive neurochemicals to the brain that can feed back to this thing I'm doing is positive and can build momentum. I think on a deeper psychological level though, things like sports and exercise, as I was mentioning before, in community sports, there's a community aspect. So I think that we also get the release of positive chemicals, and hopefully the audience can correct me if I'm wrong. I think oxytocin is involved as a chemical in terms of closeness and a sense of connection, which is also a positive thing to experience. So I think group sports or community sports increases that side of things. And the discipline, to me, the discipline isn't just about, okay, I'm doing this every morning, it's structured routine. I actually think that it helps build self-confidence because you're proving to yourself you can commit to something. I think on a deeper psychological level, often in any mental health, whether it's anxiety, bipolar, there's a lot of low self-esteem and low self-confidence because mental health can impact our function. And therefore, if we don't feel we can function well, we then think, oh, maybe I can't do a lot of things. So we don't have as much self-confidence. So the mere fact of committing to something regularly and being able to prove to yourself you can do it, I actually think increases self-confidence on a deeper psychological level above, physiology.
So can you tell us a bit more about the different, because we heard a lot about dopamine, endorphin, oxytocin. Can you explain a little bit more into detail? Because I feel sometimes we hear those words, we're like, okay, it's good chemical, and then we don't really know like how it works. And as bipolar myself, I think it helped me a lot to understand what triggers what, and the fact that it's also a chemical problem that I have as bipolar. And it's because sometimes I don't have enough, for example, dopamine. And how does dopamine affect me? And why releasing dopamine by doing sport have so much of a great effect on helping us as bipolar?
Yeah, look, that's a big question. First of all, I think as doctors in general, we have to be humble and recognize we don't understand about the brain as much as we think we do. So sometimes when we talk about biochemicals, it can feel a bit black and white, a bit simplified because it's easy to remember, but the brain's way more complex than we give it credit for. So with dopamine, it's actually a really pervasive neurochemical throughout lots of parts of the brain. And there are some areas where too much dopamine is actually not great. So I want to be really clear about that. So that's why it's a bit more complex than simply, let's just increase dopamine. For example, certain areas of the brain where there's potentially too much dopamine, it can lead to things like psychosis. Not enough area of the brain with dopamine can actually affect Parkinson's. So there's a lot more complex than we give it credit for. In terms of the more simplified model, one of the areas of dopamine that really activates on is something called the reward pathway. The reward pathway is a set of nerves in the brain where there's this pathway when you do something pleasurable, it increases dopamine. So it feeds back to your brain, oh, that was enjoyable, let's do more of that. And with things like exercise, when you do something like that and it increases dopamine, it reinforces this is a pleasurable thing. The difference, though, unfortunately, is that pathway can also be lit up by like food, can be lit up by substances. And that's why addictions can be so powerful because, things like exercise, to get that same dopamine hit, it requires a lot more effort. Things like, methamphetamine, substances can give you a hit, so to speak, much quicker. So it can be more powerful and more addictive. So in many ways, you can get addicted to exercise, but it's much harder to compared to substances. The dopamine is involved in the reward pathway, and we want to harness it for good by doing pleasurable things that lights up that pathway, tells your brain, hey, let's do more of this feels good. And of course, we don't want to be too addicted because you can get addicted to exercise. Not super common, but it does happen as well. Dopamine's also involved in the front part of the brain where it involves more what we call sophisticated organizational aspects. It's something called executive functioning, where it involves like reasoning, planning, mood regulation, impulse control. And that's the part of the brain that ADHD is involved in. So not one of the explanations of ADHD, again, this is a very simplified model, is that maybe we don't regulate or process dopamine well enough in the front part of the brain, and it leads to a lot of disorganization. Hence why I went back to the idea, like with exercise, it doesn't just increase the reward pathway, but regularly doing something in a disciplined sort of way gives you a sense you can be organized, gives you a sense you're more in control, more empowerment. So yeah, I think the take-home message in terms of a mental health aspect in a really simplified way is probably the reward pathway is probably the most relevant in terms of doing something pleasurable, but it's much more complicated in different parts of the brain as well.
Yeah, it's so tough. Like I'm trying to understand, but I never really understand, and I think nobody
because no
does.
one really does either. Like and I mean, if we were really honest, when we talk about like dopamine, it activates receptors. There's a lot of what we call subreceptors. So it's not like there's only one type of dopamine receptor in the whole brain, and that's why whenever we talk about medications, it's not as simple as that of activates this, which is also why it explains some people don't respond to certain medications, because if it was that simple, then everyone should respond exactly the same way. but we have different brain chemistry, different liver chemistry, which is why medication is only one part of the jigsaw puzzle anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to say that if you're listening, of course, for myself, I take my treatment every day and it helps a lot. But if I only rely on the treatment alone, I will probably relapse. And that's sad to say, but that's it. And walking, doing sport really help. And that's one of the things I want to know more, because I like when it's really practical. Because when you want to start doing sport and you haven't done it since a long time, finding your body is really something that can help. But how do you help people go and try again and feel confident again? Because sometimes, because of what happened, we got fat or we got like, and it's really difficult to get the hope, to go back to it. How do you want to say to us in this situation?
Yeah, so to help motivate people and help people stick with any change, I often tell patients, whether it's sport or sleep schedule or diet schedule, I often tell people see change as a skill. Not many of us see change as a skill. And because if you can reframe change as a skill means you need to practice. It means you're allowed to fail. It means you get better over time. So I think sometimes what motivates people is that intellectually, most people are quite smart. They understand intellectually, oh, this makes sense. But when they can't do it, they then actually judge themselves even harder. Go, oh, I'm useless, I can't do this. But when you reframe it to go, it's not just about the understanding. Yes, that's the first bit. We all get it. We all get exercises. It's because we don't see it as a skill and we don't allow ourselves to fail. We don't allow ourselves to grow and practice. We don't need to get it right the first 100 times. First of all, conceptually seeing sport and exercise as a skill-based phenomenon. Secondly, trying to, again, pick an entry point, like I mentioned before, of what the person's comfortable with. There are some people who might be immediately comfortable joining a group sport. You have some people who might have social anxiety on top of bipolar, and therefore they're not ready for a group sport. And maybe you go, okay, do we do a home gym or something at home? Is it a treadmill, which I would never do, but other people might enjoy treadmills? Is it walking around the neighborhood? Even choosing a friend, right? Do we choose someone who's going to be supportive? Do we choose someone who's a taskmaster? Again, being really selective so you can actually always break bigger goals down into smaller parts and being really specific. And that's why I know it feels a bit grey, but we generally do try to tailor our advice and our tips to the actual individual person because it can vary per person. But I think seeing any sort of change as a skill, working at an entry point where the person feels comfortable starting whatever exercise they want to do, something they enjoy, and starting really low. We might agree, let's do it once a fortnight. Let's start there first. That, again, a lot of people might see it's too easy, but let's prove to us that we can do that and build momentum slowly. Let's not aim too high. Is how I sort of get people to get motivated over time. And look, I'll be honest, I see my patients fairly regularly. I'm really good at nagging them. I tell my patients I nag because I mean well. I'm not trying to have a go at you. And some of them tell me, oh, Steve, I had your voice in my head. That's what I was doing. I'm like, oh, hopefully it's not meant to be triggering or traumatizing. But I do genuinely, like I said, I continue to nudge. And that's also when someone's not doing it, you want to understand why. Okay, hey, Steve, I get it. I tried, it didn't work out. Let's troubleshoot. Let's change tactic. Let's review things. So having regular sessions with your therapist is also important because, a lot of the changes require practice, require time.
Yeah, and that's when we tend to forget. We always believe that everybody's perfect because of social media also. And nobody is perfect and everybody has down and one step at a time would be the saying. And I fully agree with you. It's like sometimes I don't do enough sport. And then you don't feel good, but it's okay. I will go back to it at some point. And that's one of the toughest things also that I wanted to ask you is like, whenever you had a mood change or something coming in your life, sometimes your routine are not as well as before. And you feel guilty about it. And you need to find this hope and this belief that you can start again. And how do you think and what do you want to say to us in this situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really tricky situation because we want to validate the current experience of it being really hard and not be dismissive and just go, try harder. People are already trying really hard. One thing I think helps people reframe is what we call zooming out, looking at your overall recovery pathway. And I talk about the squiggly line of recovery. We all want recovery to be like this straight line. Recovery is more like this. And sometimes when we're doing this and we're down here, we think we're back to square one. But if you're able to zoom out and go, oh, actually, no, I started here. Yes, I've dropped from here to here, but from here to here, there's actually a lot of improvement. So helping the person reframe that you actually have come a lot further than you have, even though at the moment we've dipped from previous where we were. That's one aspect that's really important, because our brain's really good at playing tricks on us. So when we drop down, we think, oh, everything's lost, nothing's worked. And I try to remind people how you feel now isn't necessarily how you always feel. And I try to empathize and I'm very direct, I'm very transparent. So I tell patients, how you're feeling at the moment is how it's always going to be. I would agree with you. I would give up myself as well. But that's a brain playing tricks on us. It's fooling us to think things have never been good, never will be. It's always will be the same like that. And that's also where part of my role is to champion you. My role is to, when you don't have the hope, I need to be the one holding that light with you. And hopefully for other people around you, not everyone has that. Some people do, some people don't. But to help sort of remind you, hey, we've been there before. We've been more well than this. We can get back there. I'll sit here with you and share these emotions with you, not dismiss it. But also I need to have some hope. And part of my role is gently, injecting that hope back into you and slowly helping you rebuild. But I find zooming out and recognizing that our recovery is more like a squiggly line is a really important perspective to have, because we demand so much of it. We are always the harshest on ourselves. I often tell people, you can't really hurt me too much because I already say so much bad things about myself already. There's nothing you can say that will hurt me even more than my internal monologue, right? So yeah, having people around us that can champion us in our time of need is important. And some people are more fortunate and they have that, and some people don't, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's something, it's telling yourself story. And as bipolar, the difficult thing sometimes is like the story we tell ourselves are not reality. In depression, you have this fog, you're telling stories that are worse than what actually happened. And when I'm in, for example, hypomania, then I'm telling myself stories that are also not the truth. I'm thinking I'm
Yes.
doing way better than what I am.
Yeah.
And it's important. I really like your concept of zooming out and having someone to cheer you up and to help you get hope. And that's what we try to do also at Hope Stage, is like building this sense of community that we are not alone, and that we will get through that. It will be tough. It will take a few years sometimes to get rehabilitation. Yeah, you'll get through that. I think I wanted to say that. It seems simple, but I've seen thousands of people doing it, and why not you? One thing I wanted to go a little bit is like, you talk about ADHD. I saw there's actually quite a lot of bipolar people who have ADHD. Can you explain us a little bit why, and what can you be doing when you have both?
Yeah, so it can be complex when you have both, and you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's not an either or process, it's both. I guess in ADHD, a lot of the treatment does tend to be quite heavily based on medication, because the understanding is really about that, again, being really simplistic here, that dopamine sort of inefficiency, so to speak, of processing it. The issue with that is that some of those medications carry a risk of causing mania or hypomania. So if someone does have bipolar and ADHD, we would generally recommend making sure they're bipolar stable, and often that involves a mood stabilizer, and all the things we talk about, eating well, sleeping well, important, but it does involve having a mood stabilizer on board before you start any stimulant medication. And that can be hard to hear because people don't want to be on too many medications, and certainly we don't want to over medicate people. And I tell people, doctors are really good at starting meds. We're not as good at taking people off meds. I often tell people, hey, let's review, do we need this, don't we need this? So when they both coexist, it can be a bit trickier to manage, but the priority would be stabilize the bipolar first, then addressing the ADHD. The other thing is sometimes they can be confused as well, because with ADHD, there's also emotional dysregulation, that people with ADHD can have highs and lows, and they can be quite rapidly shifting like bipolar. It can be hard to tease out, is my mood shift due to my ADHD, or is my mood shift due to my bipolarity, so to speak? And sometimes, even as clinicians, we don't know. And I'm very honest with patients. If I don't know something, I'll tell patients, hey, I'm not 100% sure, you're not sure, I'm not sure. What you can do is be as safe as possible And perhaps as I walk alongside you, so to speak, therapeutically, I'll get to learn your patterns more. I'll get to know you better. I'll get to pick up the cues more. And then I can give more feedback. Hey, now that I've known you a bit longer, I think this is more representative of this and this is more representative of this. But that's why mental health is complex. We don't have brain scans or blood tests to diagnose anything, unfortunately. So it can be quite complex, which is why it's important sometimes the best thing you can do is watch and wait and not necessarily do anything or act if there's no acute risk issue. Sometimes just monitoring is important. As doctors, we want to help. And we sometimes have a bit of a savior complex. The person comes to the problem, let's just give this medication. But that might not be the right move. That might be helping the doctor's anxiety, not the person's well-being. And sometimes I tell people, hey, maybe we just sit and wait, maybe make more regular catch-ups, keep an eye on things. But when you have ADHD and bipolar, it can be quite tricky to manage. But the principles are the same. Exercise, routine, structure apply equally, which is why I like this idea of taking a holistic approach. Because yes, certain meds may be made for certain conditions, but those fundamental pillars I spoke about, they are applicable to everyone.
Yeah, I fully agree. And that's usually what I work on because I'm not a doctor. But at the end of the day, if you improve your pillar, then everything works better. And I always add rotation also, because I feel like most people, and then I also had light. Maybe it's not a problem as much in Australia, but back in France, it's a bigger problem.
Really, is it? Yeah. Because obviously there's research in Scandinavia, like further north, where light is important as well.
It's also like, I heard that the color of the skin is based on the amount of light we need to get. So basically, if you're white with blue eyes, it means you were like genetically born without enough sun. So you need to get as much sun as possible. So it's why your eyes are blue and your skin is white. So Scandinavian are usually blonde, and because they don't have enough light. But when you live in close to the equator, then you usually have dark skin because you have so much light and you need to protect yourself from light, basically, and your eyes are brown. And one of the problem is like, if you're, for example, black and live in the north of France, then you're not going to get your light enough. And it could be an issue because you don't have enough light. But it's a concept that is like, we can talk about it for hours, but just what is your thought actually?
Yeah, I haven't heard that before. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. Certainly in medicine, we talk about the circadian rhythm, which is based on, light and day-night cycle. And I'm sure you've heard of this and your audience have heard of this. People take melatonin a lot for sleep. Melatonin is actually regulated by daylight and sunlight. It's the idea that, we talk about avoiding blue light. So as the sun sets, there's less light come through your eyes and your brain makes more melatonin. And melatonin is involved in basically getting your body ready for nighttime activities, one of which is sleep. And you hit on a topic of mine. We speak so much about avoiding light at nighttime. We don't speak enough about having a lot of light in the daytime. And there's something called light therapy that I tell all my patients to do because it's really cheap, it's really effective, it's the low risk, is to get as much, especially in winter at the moment, as much light as possible in the morning and in the daytime. And these days you can buy, again, when I train, I'm old, we used to have these big light boxes, we sit in front of them, no one's going to do that. You can actually buy it looks like mirror, what do you call them, makeup mirrors with a circle light around it. You can buy them for Amazon. You need something called 10,000 lux, in case your audience members are listening. It needs to have 10,000 lux. That's what the research shows to be effective. And having 15, 20 minutes a day of that can be really effective. Yeah, so light therapy actually does work. It's evidence-based, it's part of our rhythm. A lot of our hormones aren't like stable levels throughout the day. It actually fluctuates through the day and night cycle. But I haven't actually heard of the idea of, linking like skin and eye color. It makes a lot of sense in that way. Yeah.
I could go back to the research, but I'm not an expert, but I'm the same as you. I read it from different sources and it seems logical. So I'm like,
yeah.
But check it out if you're in the audience. I'm always curious to have feedback because that's the thing with science. It's like sometimes we believe something and in the next day it has been proven wrong.
Yes, but even if that's not 100% correct, definitely light therapy is evidence-based. I want to let the audience know it is something that it's not experimental, it's evidence-based, it's been well researched that regular exposure to morning light, daylight, minimize the light at night really helps our rhythm and processes.
Yeah, it's really, really great. have this one last question, which
Yes.
is like, if you had a magic wand, what would you change in mental health, Stephen?
Oh, that is such a hard question. Come on. I can't have one answer. And the answer I'm going to give is probably, it's a practical answer. It's not a really nice answer. Like, we live in the capitalist world and money is involved in funding a lot of things. So if I had a magic wand, I would like the funding of mental health, right, to match all the virtue signaling. We speak so much, oh, mental health is important. It's easy to say that. But when you look at government systems, organisationally, it's nowhere near as funded as highly as other areas of health. And if I was to be really practical and realistic, yes, there's a finite amount of money, but I think that I'm sick of hearing people tell me how important mental health is and not putting money where their mouth is, to be honest. And I don't want to leave the last question on a downer, but there's also political influences and all these other areas that influence things. And that's why I really lead by sincerity. If we were just genuinely sincere about mental health actually being really important, we would fund it properly and would do a good job. We wouldn't be just saying things because it's a nice news bite and a sound bite that wins votes. We would do it properly. Yeah, so I think funding it to the level of the importance that it does deserve, I think that would go a long way. And then obviously you can roll out a whole bunch of different treatments. But it has to be done with sincerity, which, again, I don't want to sound all political here. I don't think it happens a lot these days anymore.
Yeah, I do agree. It's like it's the same thing in France. We did the math in France, and if you invest in it, it takes time, it takes a few years, but the return on investment is like one of the craziest one you can imagine. Because then
Absolutely.
that's one of the things, but it takes years. That's a problem with politicians. Like sometimes they don't want to have like something that will take a few years to get results.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna recap a little bit what we talk about, and it's like, so we talk about the pillar of health, and I think that's a really important point, and figure it out, like how can you eat better, sleep better, do exercise, and all these things like irritation, light, socialize, and I feel like that's one of the things, and in sport and physical, it's like, it's really about what we learn is like creating habits and being positive about doing one little thing at the time, which is usually like just maybe try a little, find someone to help you do it, a body, try to do something inside the community so you will have different positive like things about it. And try to do habit stacking, like to use an habit that you will put on top of and
Mm.
really telling yourself you did great. Even if you're going a little bit down, you can just a little improvement. It's already awesome. And so that's really what I want to resume. And I want to thank you a lot, Stephen. It was great.
No, you're more than welcome. And to be honest, you summarized it much more succinctly and cohesively than I sort of blabbed on about. So I appreciate your summary. It was really good.
To learn more about bipolarity, go to our website, upstage.com, HOPESTAGE.com. See you soon.